Hello, so welcome to my channel. So yeah, again, so this is second part of the authentication mechanism. So in this video, I will discuss the session cookies and JWT authentication and the other like OAuth 2 and YDC, SAML to SSO. I will try to finish all these uh, authentication mechanism in this video. So if you haven't watched my first part of this video, then you must go to watch that first, then then watch this one. Okay, so let's jump into the documents. So okay, so this is, if you remember, in last video I have discussed how password be stored in a DB and while registration, and how user will get authenticated in login. So that's I have discussed in username and password flow mechanism. So session and cookies. So this is what, once user get authenticated via any mechanism like username and password, that your system will authenticate that user. Once user got authenticated, it will store the user information in session store DB, and it will set the session ID to a browser, right? So browser will only have the session ID. So subsequent request will get authenticated via session. Okay. So this is stateful, means server side session. That is the stateful, means each request will be needed a session cookies, right? Browser cookies where the session ID is stored, and that session ID will pass to that each resource access to get authenticated. And on server side, it may have a like user ID, roles, and authentication time, and expiration time, and CRS token, and that's all the data are stored on server side. Okay, so what the advantage of session that we store, that the server generate for that user. So advantage is like it immediate server side revocation. We can immediate, means server side revocation can be immediately done. Okay, easy logout can be done, and role can be easy role permission can be updated. Okay, you just update that role and server side it will get updated for any other further any subsequent request will check that updated data. Okay, easy logout means once you trigger the your application trigger the logout, you just go to that uh, you go to the server and delete that data, session data. That's easy, right? Disadvantage is like once you have multi-server environment, and it will be like shared, right, across the all servers or the instances of that application. It will be it should be like a shared one, right? So that once user get authenticated on server one, and if you try to access on server 2, then it will eventually get authenticated. It won't get prompted to the login again. So that the disadvantage. You will have to you have to make sure session store should be shared across all the multi server. Okay, and the second disadvantage is every authenticated request will require a session lookup. Okay, and one challenge is availability. Have to replicate across the means you have to replicate the session store in case of availability. So this is the uh, if you go to the browser, once you log in into any website or any product, whatever you using, you once you logged in and you just inspect the browser, and go to the network tab, you see the who is the host who has authenticated you, and what is the path, and what is the cookies and session ID. You can see that all these things, and that's the matter, because it's important to know about the uh, these terms and meaning, to understand how the cookies will works, and how the cookies and how cookies shared across all the navigate all the resources after authentication. So that will handled by the same site, and these is the parameters. Okay, and JWT authentication. JWT is not a complete authentication protocol. Okay, so if I say you JWT is a token is a format way of encode the payload, means encode the token, means who means after authentication it will encode the uh, user data, not a user data, what are required to know to the client whether is user authenticated, and what are the scopes that the we need to like encode that's the format. So it stand for this JSON web token, and it is in compact way to represent the claims, means it represent the claim in a JSON. What I will show you here, what is the claims. It have headers. Okay, headers will tell you which algorithm you use to encode this payload, means whatever the payload you encode here. So suppose you just enter another, I think I will be here at the table, I don't. So if you see, this is the subject, and JWT encoder. Okay, yeah, that the place you can enter. You can enter any information like username and subject and claim, and like you can also enter this your whatever the payload that required, just put it here in payload, and it will encode using this algorithm, and whatever the secret you pass here, that will use that. Once encoded, that will be passed to in a you in a API. Okay, why it is not secure? Because it is like, you can, once you get the encoded JWT token, you can paste it here, you can decode without any key. So that's why it's not secure. Okay, and it is stateless. JWT, if you see, I have discussed the session and cookies mechanism are is the stateful. It depend on the server, right? Server store the cookies, user information, but JWT is stateless. Information doesn't store anywhere, it's carried over the APIs, and in API law, application will decide and validate its signature, and who is the receiver, audience, expiry, and scopes. All these things the server will validate and make the authorization decision. Okay, so that's why it is stateless. What the benefits is for the good for distributed API, and no central session lookup for the every request. Okay, so in this case you won't need any like any lookup for the for every request in any DB, because you have all the required things in token. You just need to decode and validate it. Okay, and claim can be travel across the services. That means if you have microservices architecture, and maybe one service can be maybe one service talking to another service, and that maybe like one service passing along with its token to another service. So that's the things. And another advantage is, which is most used, like uh, public key signature let the many services verify without receiving the private keys. Okay, so all services who is receiving the claim token, that can be like verify it via public signature. And using of this JWT authentication, what the cost? Cost is like stale role may remain until expiration. This means suppose user is logged in into a app that is current role is like viewer. Okay, what viewer, and you get like suppose current role is like editor. User have edit access. Okay, and user have logged in, and maybe session will get means it will get logged in until it get expired. Maybe expiry time will like suppose 30 minutes, and in between admin can change that user role to a reader. Then it will be it won't get affect immediately until the current logged in expired, right? So that's the cost. And immediate revocation, that I have this one is difficult. And what is this is the flow how it works. User into logged in into app any application, it's and submit the client credential, and client submit the credential or federated login to a authorization or authentication server, and authentication server will authenticate the user. Once after authenticate, it will authorize the scopes and roles to give to the user what is the given to the user. And once all these things validated, then it will generate the signed JWT token where all the claim exist. Once signed claim generated, it will return that signed access token, that signed JWT token, access token, along with the refresh token. Refresh token required when like once the user logged in, it won't get logged out after a particular time, so that uh, it will like your system will get a new token after once current access token about to expire. So for any resources, subsequent resources access, you system will pass only the access token, and it will validate. Resource server will validate the verify JWT token, you issuer, who is the issuer, who is the audience, expiry, scope, all these things will get validated here. Once it validated, it will uh, enable you a protected data access. So this is all about the JWT authentication. So the most important and most used authentication mechanism is like OAuth 2 and open OpenID Connect. So OAuth 2 is a standardized framework that delegate authentication part to any third party server. So if you I say like you have seen that you have once you have seen in many product or many website where you have just go to the like visited and you try to log in, either you will enter your credential to that website if you registered in that website. If you not register, you can logged in via any third party uh, identity system like Gmail, Facebook, or any social login providers. So it will prompt you once you click on Gmail, it will prompt you to a Gmail server, authentication server. Then you you will be like see the what are the consent, you will give the consent of the what are the data, protected data that application asks for. So you once you grant that uh, once you approve that consent, that then application will get able to you will able to you logged in into that application. So that's the things. So in simple term, if I say what is OAuth ask? OAuth ask, can this client application access a protected resources? Means whatever the application you are trying to access that is protected behind any authentication, that is you are trying to access with the particular scope on behalf of this user. Okay, so your client, your application, your user trying to access, that ask the permission to any third party server, is this is the user can this access or not. So, or to enable the client to obtain a limited access to HTTP resources on behalf of the resource owner. Owners means users. Okay, to that application. And what to answer the authorization question in simple word. Okay, will the this application uh, have access to the particular resources or not? Okay, that tells the what to by delegating responsibility to any social login, any third party authentication server. Okay, so and OpenID. Once wherever you see OAuth 2 framework, it will always use with the OAuth 2 with the OIDC. OIDC answer the authentication question. OIDC connect ask which user authenticated at OpenID provider. Okay, and what the identity claim did the provider assert, and OIDC adds the OpenID scope and ID tokens, standard identity claims, and user info. And OIDC explicitly defined on the top of the OAuth 2. Okay, so if you as I discussed, like for any product where you go to login, you see multiple options. Sign in with the Google or Microsoft or Facebook or any uh, identity provider. Once you click on that, like what to only like I have received the authorization usage for that API, but OIDC tells I have received the very verifiable assertion about the authenticated user. What my mean by it? What mean by it means suppose you an application you are trying to log in and you click on Gmail and you redirected to a Gmail server. It consent from you whatever the information that particular client or application asking for. So it will give you the authorization usage for that API, but who is the user related information that it will give by the OIDC to the application from the authentication server. Okay, so if you see the OIDC and OAuth2 roles, this is the role is the resource owner. Resource owner is the user who trying to access the application, and the user agent is the browser from where you trying to access the application. Client is the your application you are trying to get access or requesting for the access, and authorization server is the issue OAuth token, and OpenID Connect is the authorization server that support the OIDC, and resource server API that accept the token and give the authentication. Okay, authorization code flow with the pesky. Okay, this is what I need to discuss. So let's discuss it first. So in authorization code flow, where we discussing the OAuth 2 plus OIDC mechanism. So if you see ever like see in while logged in via Gmail into any website, so you see this is the like call your client, your application will call to the Gmail or any authorization or identity provider. Okay, so SPA means single page application and native client scenario, and your application, once you click on login or trying to access the protected access for an application or a website, it will first check the session. If session doesn't exist for that for you, then it will prompt you the like redirect you or prompt you according to the implementation to the identity provider. So it will call the authorize, where it ask for the response type code, and it give the your system will give the client ID, so that authorization server will know who is the client asking for the consent or authentication on behalf of the user. Okay, so once user authenticated to that authentication server, then that authentication server will redirected with the code to that callback URL, means redirected URI. Okay, with the code, and that the scope will tell the what are the scope will granted for that user to access to given a client. Okay, and state is something like you pass to any random string unique per request, so that to avoid the CSRF attack, code challenge and challenge method is the two things which is generally used in authorization code with the pesky flow. So that is like your client will generate any random secret and encode with that algorithm, and will pass that. Once the response get bad, it will validate again, so that it will be secure in between network over the network. Okay, so state is correlated the response with the browser transaction against the login CSRF random rams one time. Pesky client means your application, the your application or the application the user trying to access, which that generate the code with random secret. Uh, that random secret will be hashed by this algorithm and passed to that this request, and once you get the token, it will validate again. Okay, so type of tokens, that is the ID token. ID token is purpose for who is authenticated and which provider authenticate them. Okay, that ID token will tell us, once you decode it, it will tell who is authenticated, means user, who is the user who is authenticated, and the provider means IDP, identity provider, that authenticate that user. Okay, and when authentication occurred and client assertion is intended for or not, means which client is an assertion this ID token for. Typical value for this one, this is issuer, subject, and audience is client, and expiry time that it will tell, and authorization it when it will authorized. That's all the information. Once you decode it, it will present it ID token. And ID token consumed by the client, even the application. It should not be normally used in API access token. API access token is something else, that is access token, which you get along with the ID token. So purpose of this client present this access token in API access, which is protected resources that pass this access token, so that it will get all the claim will get validated to access the protected data. Okay, refresh token, which I have discussed earlier, to refresh the access token. Okay, so OIDC and OAuth 2 uses social login enterprises login flow that centralize identity across the multiple application, that is mostly used in this place. So suppose you have multiple microservices. Okay, protected microservices. Suppose services 1, services 2, services, and number of microservices, and you are trying to like all these are protected. And so instead of building separate for each one, you build one authentication system that is wrap up to all the microservices, so that all the microservices will authenticate with the one single identity system. Okay, so that's the OAuth 2 authorization code flow with the pesky. So I'm walking through this one how it will works. So once you like open any application, and that application will first check the session who exist for that user or not. If not exist, then it will redirect to authorize whatever the mechanism implemented to that application. Then it will authorize, let's suppose it will authorize to a slash authorize URL. Then it will pass the whatever I have discussed earlier, like redirected URIs, pass the state, code verifier, challenger, all these things it generate client backend, and it will pass to the OpenID or authorization server, and authorization server will check that client, and it will generate it. Yeah, so then it will, what it will do, then it will redirect it to the authorize. Then browser, if you see in a browser network tab, you will able to see that where it will get redirected. So once it is redirected to identity provider, means authorization server, then it will prompt the user. If session doesn't exist, then it prompt the user on server side, prompt the user to enter the password or passkey, whatever the authentication mechanism are implemented there at this level, means username and password, a passkey or MFA, whatever the. Then once the all the steps done by the user, then it will like uh, prompt to a consent screen if required. Otherwise, silently redirected to that redirected UI with the code and state. Then your application will backend application will verify that state, whatever the state it will send, it will match that state, so that avoid the CSRF attack. And that code it will called use for the token call. Then your backend system will again application system will again called for the token with the authorization code and core verifier to the authentication server, and the authentication server will verify the code and it verify the pesky challenges. Once it all get verified, then it will issue the ID token, access token, and refresh token to a client, and client validate, issue your audience whatever uh, required things need to validate it. Validate. After validating, it secure HTTP only session cookies. It generate a HTTP session, uh, and browser store that session for that client. Okay, and for any protected and further any protected resources or any API, only just pass the access token, and resource server will verify that issue, validate issuer, audience, expiration, scope, all these things. If all these get validated, it will you will able to access the protected resources. That's the OAuth 2 authorization code flow. Okay, so that's it all about the OAuth 2. For any doubts or any confusion, you can ask me in a comment. I will pick that comment and try to clear that. Okay, so if I show you the demo for how OAuth 2 authorization code flow works, so let me go to the OAuth 2 playground. You can just search the OAuth 2.0 playground on a Chrome. You can just uh, simulate this behavior on a browser. Okay, so let's discuss the what with the Pisky. Let me only OAuth code. This is only for OAuth code. Let me go to the first, show you the demo for the OAuth 2 2.0, how it works. So you can get it via this. To get better understanding, you must visit it and try yourself how it works. At step 1, build authorization URL and redirect the user to the authorization server. Okay. Second step, after the user redirected back to the client, verify the state matches and exchange the authorization for the access token. Once step 3 done, all done related to the authentication and authorization. Okay, so this is, if you see, this as a sample uh, URL for the authorization and slash authorize, and this is the domain for which it built the cookies, and it's asking for the response type is code, and it's the client random client ID for the demo, and redirected back to this one, and scope photo and offline access, and state. If I record this state, this should be match once it get back the response. Okay, so once I click on authorization, I have to enter the uh, username and password, right? So let me just enter the username. Okay, so maybe it should work. And password. It is dummy username password I have generated on this one. So let me just log in it. So it will prompt you a consent application what to playground. Would you like to ability to access your photo? Once you approve that, then it will redirect you to the this one. If you see, uh, if I show you, this is right redirected by this one, this authorization code HTML. And if you see, this is the authorization code HTML with the state and code that the client needed for the access token or ID token. So state should be match, and once state match and we get the code, then our client will ask for the token from the slash token call by passing the this code. So yes, match and continue. Once you match and continue, it will go to third step. It will call the authorization server slash token. Now I need a slash token. Grant type is authorization code. Okay, so client ID in where in where the authorization server will pass the client ID and client secret and redirect a device after the token where the token, and with code which you get in a step 2. Just go with that. Once you click on go with that, token endpoint response will be like this, as I have discussed. This is bearer response type, token type, and it will show you the expiry when the token will get expired. And this is the access token and scope and refresh token. It will show you. Yeah, that's the you can visit that playground and you can try with yourself to understand practical way. Okay, so that's it all about this video. So next in video, I will discuss the next part, which is the last one, which is the SSO, authentication and SAML protocol. Okay, thank